loss, more commonly referred to as male pattern baldness, is an intriguing phenomenon. I've heard people proclaim before that they can't believe that something like hair loss hasn't already been solved, yet we can put people in space and we can destroy entire cities with nuclear weapons. The truth is, the cause of hair loss has already been solved. The research exists and it's sitting right in plain sight where anyone can find it. I'll show it to you today. But thanks to our old friends Greed and Dogma, going under the monikers these days of Big Pharma and Big Science, nobody will hear about it. In this case, billion-dollar drugs like Finasteride are creating life-altering, often irreversible side effects in thousands of men every year, including documented suicides, and it's time we shine some light on the darkness. Like most things, the truth is staring us right in the face. By the end of this video, I'll have shown you the real cause of hair loss in humans. You will know why you're losing hair, and you'll know what you can do specifically to stop it and reverse it. First, I'm going to trace back the current understanding of male pattern baldness. What do the masses believe is the cause of hair loss, and why do they believe it? Where did that information come from? And who wins from this dogmatic view, while others lose? I'll show you the rather large inconsistencies in this present dogmatically accepted hypothesis of hair loss, but it'll become quite obvious why the mainstream public is not aware of those discrepancies. Then I'm going to show you what actually causes hair loss in men. This information is interestingly hiding right in front of our faces, yet nobody seems to see it, and why I believe this is actually just another clever trick being played in the name of profit. So buckle up, and let's dive into today's Truth Tuesday. If you ask the average doctor what causes hair loss, he or she will almost guaranteed tell you that DHT, testosterone, and/or predetermined genetic factors are the cause. They'll prescribe you a drug and they'll push you on your way. Ask any guy on the street the same exact question, you'll get the same exact answer.
I just have one question about hair. Where does mine start?
And you, watching this video right now, what do you think? Haven't we all heard this explanation as well? How did we all come to believe this? And if such a commonly held belief is actually true, then why are guys still losing their hair? Didn't Big Science and Big Pharma, quote, solve this problem? Don't we have a cure? Evidenced by a massive rise in hair loss treatment surgeries in recent years, it appears as though the issue is only steadily getting worse and worse.
Holy crap!
Oh my god, me too!
In just 4 years between 2008 and 2012, for example, the hair loss treatment surgery data rose a whopping 48%, then another 27% from 2012 to 14, then another 18% from 14 to 2016. Alongside this rise in surgeries adding up to multiple billions of dollars per year in the USA alone, and rising even more massively in areas like Mexico and Central America, which are up 82% from 2012 to 14, and then up a staggering 132% from 14 to 16, as well as dramatic increases across Europe, Asia, and Africa and the Middle East. We're also seeing a simultaneous eruption in pharmaceutical sales for this specific issue. Follow the money, as the saying goes, and you'll see the truth. The hair loss industry itself is projected to cross $11 billion a year in sales market value by 2024. Now, drugs like Finasteride are making up a rapidly growing part of this segment, projected to double in value from 2015 to 2024, especially with expansion into large markets like China, due to huge rises in hair loss recently due to suspiciously sudden changes in hormone levels in the Chinese population over recent years. But clearly, something has been happening recently.
I can't take it. I'm just gonna draw a hairline on.
And this requires a closer look. To fully understand the sequence of events, we need to go back to the beginning. How does an industry that cures hair loss blow up to multi-billions of dollars per year in sales seemingly overnight? Meanwhile, the instances of hair loss, the problem that it claims to solve, simultaneously appears to be increasing as well. To fully understand all of this, it helps to understand the origin of the androgen hypothesis. Let's track this back to ground zero.
I think it's a safe bet that that's responsible.
Alright, so the androgen hypothesis and the subsequent massive multi-billion-dollar a year industry that spawned around it is entirely based around two research papers. The first was an observational study of 104 castrates, also known as eunuchs, done by Dr. J.B. Hamilton in 1942. Now, Dr. Hamilton studied these eunuchs, who were obviously characterized by a lack of testicular hormone production, i.e. low to non-existent androgen levels, and he noticed a couple key things about them. First off, they all had a complete retention of head hair. Quote, men who failed to mature sexually did not become bald. Even the recession of the line of hair of the temples and foreheads, which is observed in the majority of normal men, failed to appear. Now second, the sebaceous secretions were low. So all three tests employed demonstrated that the quantity of these secretions was small, even during the latter half of the second decade of life when secretion is copious in normal males. Touching of the skin with the fingertips is sufficient to indicate that the hair in the scalp was less oily than in normal men of comparable age. And the third observation he saw was that dandruff was really limited. So dandruff was either absent or was present in such limited amounts that only few white flakes could be brushed from the scalp. In men who had failed to mature, sexually excessive quantities of dandruff were reported never to have been present at any age. Kind of confusing language, but basically he said these eunuchs didn't have dandruff, or only a tiny bit. Next, Dr. Hamilton gave these castrates testosterone injections with testosterone propionate. He observed the following things. Out of the group, 4 of the castrates began to bald. 4 of them. Out of 104. The balding pattern was essentially what we now call male pattern baldness, with the main affected areas being around the forehead, the frontoparietal regions, and the crown of the head. Increased sebaceous gland activity and more dandruff. So they had oilier skin and more dandruff. He saw, in his words, which is kind of vague also, a commonality of the baldness of these 4 guys. They also had relatives who were bald. And he also remarks that the quantities of androgens prerequisite for baldness need not exceed those secreted by the testes of young adult males and are probably less in at least some cases. So basically in the conclusion to this paper, he wrote the following. It seems noteworthy that androgenic incitation of alopecia, which is hair loss, is an example in the human of a mechanism whereby a genetic predisposition may be realized. In an individual genetically susceptible to alopecia, development of the gonads as testes will assure, in the usual course of events, the secretion of androgenic incitants of alopecia. In other words, based on the observation of an unnatural group of people, less than 4% of whom reacted to testosterone propionate injections by balding, he concluded that all men, if they sexually mature to the point of producing androgens in their testicles, i.e. reach puberty, who have some unknown genetic predisposition, will become bald. Sounds airtight, right? Are you kidding me? An entire multi-billion-dollar industry was based off of this research. No wonder there's so many unexpected side effects of taking these hair loss pharmaceuticals. There are some major holes in this theory, even considering other findings within his own study that complicate this hypothesis quite a bit, yet are widely ignored for convenience sake, and it is, again, merely a hypothesis, which would likely surprise most people since anybody you ask nowadays considers this the truth. First off, the fact that this entire theory revolves around this, quote, black box genetic scapegoat is concerning, especially since that very assertion actually defeats itself immediately. Think about this for a second. A group of men who fail to mature sexually are immune to genetic predisposition for baldness. When injected with the testosterone propionate, 4 of these men are now suddenly victim to their genetics. This is confusing to say the least. I'd say this begs more questions than it answers. And to use the cop-out of genetics, which is actually really, really common in modern science to use as a non-answer answer to questions a researcher cannot answer, and completely ignore epigenetics and the reality of epigenetics in general, this is another irritating piece of this whole puzzle. So where does DHT come into all of this, you might be wondering? The answer is an observational study on Dominican Republic pseudohermaphrodites. Now, this study was found that this group, known as the guavidoses, had normal levels of testosterone, lacked the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, and yet had 0 instances of male pattern baldness. The finding in itself is actually even less correlative than the previous one from Dr. Hamilton. However, Big Pharma decided to step in at this point. You see, they noticed that in this study regarding the guavidoses, all of them had small prostates. Merck, the pharmaceutical company, had already seen a massive rise in enlarged prostate issues in Western men, so, pretty much between them and all the other pharmaceutical companies, somebody was just waiting to jump on the prostate issue. They needed a drug that they could sell for this issue. So they saw a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor as a great potential drug to sell to this specific audience. They especially liked this drug's potential with crossing into multiple niches, both hair loss and prostate enlargement. Obviously, that would be better for their profits. Finasteride was born, which is also known as Propecia. You see what I mean? The androgen theory also fails to address some pretty glaring holes in the argument about androgens causing hair loss as well. In Dr. Hamilton's study, none of the prepubertal castrates went bald. There were different types of castrates here. None of the ones who were castrates pre-puberty went bald when treated with the testosterone injections. This is a really interesting thing, yet it remains unaddressed. Also, The testosterone injections are well known to have different negative side effects than natural testosterone production. For example, T injections have been found to lead to issues such as liver toxicity, hardened tendons, heart and circulation problems, and prostate cancer and hair loss, whereas natural T production does not cause these things. So why is using an injection sufficient, quote, evidence to be extrapolated to all normal and natural situations? It's not. Also, if DHT and testosterone cause hair loss in men, why does nearly all hair loss in men come during the years when all the data points to a simultaneous decline in DHT and testosterone levels in those same men, yet very little statistical hair loss occurs in men during the time when androgen levels, testosterone and DHT, are at their peak in the late teens and early 20s? Guys who are balding when sampled for hormone tests are almost always found to have normal levels of androgens, i.e. the same levels as non-balding men. The fact is that this entire theory is based off the idea that even though androgens are known to be responsible for the growth and thickness of hair, that some unknown, quote, genetic predisposition somehow makes them do the opposite. That's concerning, and that points to how shallow this theory really is. The unknown genetic predisposition argument is always a cop-out for scientists that mean we don't know, while sounding good to the masses who readily accept it as an answer since they don't know any better anyways, and they've been conditioned to accept anything said by the high priests of big science as a fact without question. This entire theory of hair loss is literally the least scientifically rigorous theory on the planet right now, and this is a castle literally built on sand. Unfortunately, as the tide comes in, Merck sails away on their mega yacht while hundreds of thousands of men out there suffer from a massive range of negative side effects of this drug.
Right, like thousands of men across the country, Paul Ennis was concerned with the prospect of losing his hair when it began thinning in his 30s.
Well, to stop the process, Paul opted to take medication suggested by his GP. However, he wasn't prepared for the extreme side effects. They left him practically impotent, shrunk his penis, and left him depressed and suicidal.
Well, Paul's here today with his former girlfriend, Hayley Woodbury, to tell the story. And welcome to both of you. Paul, thank you for being here today. I said this, it was in your early 30s that you first noticed your hair beginning to thin. What was the...
Merck claims that Finasteride is effective at stopping hair loss, yet the data shows that after 5 years of use, the average Finasteride patient can only expect around a 10% improvement in their condition over not using the drug. Doesn't seem to be any skin off Merck's back, however, as their sales continue to rise for an ineffective drug, not to mention the massive boom in drug sales for all the conditional side effects that are caused by Finasteride, like erectile dysfunction, which is another massive multi-billion-dollar a year niche. This short interview sums up the things that basically most of these men can experience when they use Finasteride.
Guru I spoke to before the break, millions of people swear by their miracle medications, but at what cost? Kevin Malley says the hair loss drug Propecia did more than grow his hair. He says it made him slip into a mental fog, it made him impotent, and even shrank his genitals. Dr. Sharon Berquist from Emory University standing by. But Kevin, those are tough things to admit, especially to the world, coming on national television and doing it, international television. Why do it?
Well, I want to warn other men who might be considering Propecia that this drug is extremely dangerous, and it's not what Merck said it was.
You are part of a class action lawsuit against Merck, the company that makes Propecia. And they say that Merck believes that Propecia, which is Finasteride, has demonstrated safely and inefficacy profiles, and the product labeling appropriately describes the benefits and the risks of the drug to help inform prescribing. So they saw no causal relationship between the use of Propecia and continued sexual dysfunction after discontinuing the treatment. How do you respond to that?
Well, if the warning labels are adequate, why did they have a discrepancy in the warning labels between the continents? And they also changed the warning labels 4 times in the past 2 years. So obviously Merck knows that there is a danger, but they don't want to properly warn the public.
How old were you when you started taking it? How long ago did you start taking it?
I took it off and on from May to October 2011.
And when did you
started noticing serious?
Yeah. When did you start noticing the side effect?
I started noticing severe problems around October. I was doing jiu-jitsu with my girlfriend, and I noticed my body wasn't responding correctly. And then when it was time for sex, I noticed things weren't responding properly either. So I got off the drug. And I fully expected things to get better, but that's when the side effects got extreme.
What did your doctor say to you?
The exact opposite. Doctor said there's nothing we can do for you. Give it some more time. And I gave it 6 months. I went back to the doctor. I was worse than ever. And he said there's nothing I could do for you. I've been on a testosterone replacement therapy for a couple months, and that's only had moderate improvements.
Now, it becomes apparent that the truth about actually solving hair loss matters very little to Big Pharma and science right now. Hell, they're literally making billions of dollars per year by not solving the problem. Sounds like cancer, too. How fucked is this system?
This can't be legal.
What kind of world is this?
Now that you understand how bad this theory is, let's look at what the actual cause of hair loss is, because the research actually exists out there. It's out in plain sight for people, yet, it's not being translated through the medical system as the actual cure. Hopefully this is very helpful for all you guys out there with problems with hair loss. I want to make sure and give you some to-dos and some specific, the real cause, as well as some specific things you can go do as a protocol to help reverse your hair loss, because it'll work.
Dear God, give a bald guy a break. Amen.
So what causes hair loss? Interestingly, actually the best clues to what causes hair loss start in the case of studies on babies and on women. So babies lose their hair shortly after birth. It's called postnatal hair loss in the same male pattern baldness pattern. So do menopausal women. So do women postpartum, which is after pregnancy. So do women using contraceptive drugs. Now we're on to something. Now for men. Baldness is a key symptom that occurs with instances of heart disease and metabolic syndrome in men, in atherosclerosis, in insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, prostate cancer, and obesity-related inflammation. Now we're cooking. Examining this full body of research and all the blood markers around all these instances, you start to actually see some painfully obvious patterns emerge. What do all these situations have in common? Alright, so all of these situations between babies, women, and men having this same pattern of hair loss involve the following 7 things. First, chronically elevated cortisol levels. Second, chronically elevated estrogen levels, which makes sense because there's also a feedback loop between cortisol and estrogen where they both increase one another over time as well. The third thing is low thyroid function. The fourth thing is a liberation of free fatty acids in the bloodstream, which also stimulates estrogen production. So it's all being fed back into this feedback loop. You got to stop this feedback loop. The fifth thing is also, this is a really, really key part of this whole thing, is chronically elevated prolactin levels. Now, the sixth thing is something known as mucopolysaccharide accumulation in the scalp tissue, which is the matrix for calcification. And this was found when doctors went back and surveyed cadavers and took samples of cadavers that were bald in, like medical school cadavers. They found that every single one of the bald people had this mucopolysaccharide accumulation in the scalp and excessive calcification in the scalp, which also there's an interplay with iron in this case. And the seventh thing is all of these audiences, all these subject groups have a drop in protective hormones while simultaneously increasing stress hormone levels like cortisol and estrogen. And a protective hormone in this case would be something like progesterone. So there's a ratio here that really matters. So if you control and balance these hormones, the stuff I just mentioned, the cortisol, the estrogen, the thyroid, the prolactin, and then increasing protective hormones. If you control this all through proper nutrition, micronutrient correction, and stress management, you will reverse your hair loss.
I have hair. I have hair!
Let's look at some specific recommendations. I want to make sure that I put together an action plan for anyone who needs to stop and reverse their hair loss for good. Now, first off, control your excess estrogen. To control estrogen, I recommend taking the following 4-step approach. First, methylate the estrogen that's in your system. You can do this by consuming choline and betaine, and betaine is also really amazing for stomach acid. Second, lose the extra body fat that you have that's above about a 15%, for guys. And then the equivalent for women. Women naturally hold more body fat. This excess estrogen in your system is being stored in this fat tissue. You got to get rid of that fat tissue. Now, third, supplement with or up the dietary intake from things like vitamin A, K2, and vitamin D. For vitamin D, go out in the sun more. But vitamin A and K2 are really, really important. And also vitamin A has been shown to naturally upregulate the expression of androgen receptors in key tissue. And then the fourth thing is drastically reduce your exposure to estrogenics in your environment and in your diet. Now, people consume a lot of things that are estrogenic. I talk about that here on the channel. in terms of food, but you're also being exposed to these estrogenics in general. I recommend, if you really want to fully arm yourself with all that information, in my book, Master Your T, I talk about it. Also, there's a book called Estrogeneration that really goes into a lot of depth about estrogenics in our environment and the ones that you're exposed to. So take that 4-step system to reduce your estrogen. Second, control your cortisol. Cortisol management comes down to stress management. Also, there's a feedback loop with estrogen, like I mentioned. So if you're controlling your estrogen, do the following for cortisol. Stress management can be done on both the psychological and the physiological level. On the psychological level, stop reacting to things. A shift from a negative outlook to a positive outlook is entirely necessary. Most people are going to overlook this. They're going to discount it as not important. But control of your mind and your worldview is absolutely massive to your success in this. On the physiological level, you must increase oxygen consumption by improving your breathing. Spend 10 to 20 minutes per day in deep breathing with a good posture. Also, stop eating shitty food. It's causing your body cellular stress. So that this stress can happen on every level. And when it's happening on the cellular level, it's translating up through your organs, your organ systems into the full organism. So there's an energy translation there. You have to make sure that you're not causing stress on the cellular level as well. In terms of exercise, also stop doing chronic endurance training. Focus on heavy lifting and explosive movements with plenty of rest between sets and sessions so you can really recover and have this as a eustress, a positive stress that helps you grow instead of a distress, which is a destructive stress. Third, very, very important section. Take notes on this. Lower your prolactin levels. All right, to lower prolactin quickly and naturally, I recommend supplementation with KSM66 ashwagandha like we have in Testro X. Now, this specific study right here found a significant 15% drop in prolactin in men taking ashwagandha while simultaneously increasing testosterone production by 40%. Like I said, you got to increase the ratio of the protective hormones to the destructive hormones, to the stress hormones like prolactin. So this ashwagandha is awesome for that. Also, increase the amount of vitamin E that you're either getting in your diet or use a vitamin E supplement. In this study, 300 milligrams of vitamin E for 8 weeks decreased prolactin levels by a staggering 69% when compared to placebo in healthy human subjects. Also, I recommend using L-Dopa, like you can find in the Truth Nutra Dopamucuna or any kind of mucuna supplement. Dopamine modulates the release of prolactin. Also, up your zinc. I mentioned this in a recent video. One of the key symptoms of zinc deficiency is hair loss, and daily supplementation of zinc was found to cut male prolactin levels in half. And last thing to do to decrease prolactin is to increase your vitamin B6 consumption. B6 has been found to significantly increase growth hormone production while simultaneously slashing prolactin production. Again, protective hormones going up and stress hormones going down. These things are important. This ratio is very important. Now, the fourth thing you got to do is improve your thyroid function. For those with a damaged thyroid, if you're losing hair, you have a damaged thyroid, by the way, you must do everything in your power to improve your thyroid function. I initially recommend that people use a desiccated thyroid supplement to treat this and kickstart your thyroid again. I also recommend supplementing with iodine and selenium. It helps if you get these levels measured, though, so you really know how far to supplement with it to correct the deficiencies. Reset Yourself is a good micronutrient measuring service. resetyourself.com. Tell them I sent you if you go over there. Use this supplementation protocol for at least 4 to 8 weeks to correct these deficiencies. I definitely recommend monitoring it. Do this while simultaneously conditioning your dietary nutrition around consuming all the nutrients that your thyroid needs to function properly. Yes, this means stop doing the keto diet. Consume plenty of carbohydrates from whole food sources like fruits and tubers. For example, here are some before and after pictures of people with low thyroid function who went on a similar protocol that I just mentioned with the supplementation and diet strategy. Notice the absolutely massive difference in these people. They look literally like different people. Also take note of how much better these individuals' hair looks after the thyroid is improved. One way to tell if you have low thyroid issues is actually just look in the mirror at elements of your facial structure. Use this picture right here as a guide. And if you don't believe me about the keto diet causing hair loss, I'm going to touch on this subject briefly. I'm also going to release an entire video on this subject since the video here is actually getting kind of long. So, long story short, the hair follicle itself, the biological mechanism of the hair follicle, this organ, requires glucose to metabolically function and actually grow hair. This is real. Hair follicles are already inefficient organs. However, in the absence of readily available glucose, they become extremely poor. Hair follicles require oxygen and fuel from either glucose, fructose, or pyruvate for hair to grow. In the absence of these fuels, fatty acids or ketone bodies were found to not be able to sustain hair growth. I was actually completely blown away when I searched on YouTube for the subject of keto and hair loss, and I found the following video. Apparently, so many people had written in wanting help on this subject of losing their hair on the keto diet that it prompted the creation of this video. His recommendation, by the way, was to eat more calories from the keto diet nonetheless, and eat more protein. There's no mention here of cortisol from the stress of the keto diet. There's no mention of increased estrogen production from the excess free fatty acids in the bloodstream. There's no mention of high prolactin, and there's no mention of thyroid and poor thyroid function. Anyway, I scrolled through the comments, and this got worse. I couldn't even believe what I was reading. Comments like these littered this comment section on this video. Now, for example, thanks for addressing. I lost half of my hair 3 months after adding IF and keto. Are you kidding me? That's insane. If I lost half my hair, I'll be so freaking pissed. Here's one. My hair is falling out from 2 years of keto until I started adding fulvic mineral supplementation in the morning. And actually, fulvic minerals, something we recommend on anabolic men for help with testosterone. Yep, lost lots of hair. I don't know if it'll regrow. That sucks. Sir, I've been doing keto plus IF since 5 months now. I've lost around 100 pounds, which is good. But recently, my hair is falling out. So he's losing that. He lost 100 pounds on the stress metabolism. That's freaking nuts. At least someone on this comment section called it like it is. Anyways, I'll do another video about how keto causes hair loss, but I definitely wanted to show this to you in case you're currently on the keto diet. This is real stuff. You'll probably want to reconsider that based on how it lowers your thyroid function while simultaneously starving your hair follicles of the actual very fuel that they need to grow hair. So let's sum up this whole video. All right, first off, the androgen hypothesis for hair loss is completely unscientific and not based in any kind of complete reality. It's literally been manipulated from day one, from the beginning, by the pharmaceutical industry in order to sell more drugs, create more side effects, sell more drugs for those side effects. This is their MO. This is what they do. Second, hair loss in humans, not just men, but men, women, and children across the board, is caused by the following things: high estrogen, high cortisol, high prolactin, low thyroid function. All of these things are caused by micronutrient deficiencies, which I've been saying for years, chronic stress, and exposure to estrogenics through the environment and certain food sources, which is basically a high estrogen load, and with the storage of that estrogen in excess body fat tissue. This is also coupled with drops in protective hormones like progesterone, which highlights that this is ratio dependent. The ratio of stress hormones to protective hormones is super, super important. And when stress hormones increase while protective hormones simultaneously drop, then that's when things get really bad. The last thing is that hair follicles require glucose, fructose, and or pyruvate to actually grow hair. They can't grow hair using fatty acids or ketones. And that's it. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. Hopefully it helps shed some light on this murky subject. Follow my advice. You're going to regrow your hair. Don't fret. Give this video a like if you liked it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications because I'm going to keep busting myths and taking names. Now let me know your questions in the comments below or if I missed anything. Also, I wanted to shout out to Danny Roddy for all his work on this subject. He regrew his own hair using a similar protocol, and he's been helping others figure out some sense of clarity on this subject because it is such a confusing topic for a lot of people. I actually originally started reading Danny Roddy's work on hair back in 2012 when I wrote my original Testosterone IO program, and I referenced him in that program as well. Now you can actually read the updated version of my work on the subject of testosterone optimization for health in Master Your T, which is available on truthnutri.com. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.